Hi, everyone. Welcome to another special webinar hosted here on the KE Report. I'm your host, Cory Fleck. In this webinar, we are featuring Maple Gold Mines. Now, I am joined by two Maple Gold Mines representatives. First and foremost, Jonas Lang, Executive VP of Maple Gold. Also, Fred Speidel, Vice President of Exploration. So in this webinar, we will be taking questions. I already have a number of questions that have come. So please, everyone who is joining us, use that questions tab on your screen, wherever it might be placed. I will get those questions directly and add them to a list of the questions that I will interject throughout this webinar. There will also be a recording available shortly after, and a recording that I will post on my website, kereport.com. Just a couple housekeeping items here. Maple Gold Mines is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol MGM, and on the OTCQB under the symbol MGMLF. We are really going to focus on this Douay Gold Project, and a lot of the focus being on some of the actions that the company is going to undertake to continue to move this project forward. Guys, I'm going to throw it over to you. Let's get right into this presentation. I am going to turn off our cameras just so it doesn't distract from the actual presentation being given. And again, at any time, if any questions come up, please put those in that questions tab. If that's not functioning for you, you can always email me, fleck@kereport.com. Jonas, Fred, please take it away. Let's get this webinar underway.
Okay, we have the usual disclaimer. Jonas.
Sure. So just to start off with the high-level investor checklist, clearly being in Quebec, one of the most premium jurisdictions on the planet, ranked 4th by the Fraser Institute recently. Maple Gold has an established resource, 422,000 ounces in the indicated category, and just over 2.3 million ounces in the inferred category. In terms of infrastructure, we'll touch on that. Excellent power to site, right off the major highway, local airports, etc. Management includes ex-Ivanhoe Mines. Our CEO spent 12 years as an exec VP with Ivanhoe. Fred Speidel from Inmet, along with Gerald Riveren, one of our recent board appointees. Attractive valuation as well. We're still trading at roughly $45 million market cap, or $10 an ounce. So in terms of the infrastructure here, we are about 2 hours north of Val-d'Or on Highway 109. Power right to site. You see the airport metogamy up to the northeast part of the slide. The property package is 355 square kilometers, and we are situated right along the Casa Berardi deformation zone. You can see the Casa Berardi mine out to the east, or sorry, to the west. Also nearby is the former Eagle Tell Bell mine, which was the namesake for Agnico Eagle, produced just over 1 million ounces at roughly 6 grams per ton. Further to the east of us, about 10 kilometers, there is the Veza Gold mine that just recently closed, and that produced 500,000 ounces at roughly 6 grams per ton as well. I'll pass over to Fred here, who had some regional experience in the area, not to date him, but I think back starting in 1988. Fred.
Yeah, I started my career off in 1988 in northern Quebec and worked on a number of intrusive gold-related systems before going to Latin America for 21 years and coming back here to going back to my roots basically. So I worked at in the Lac Short area, which was a very similar deposit, but Douay is significantly larger. And I was also involved with the Troilus discovery, which is another intrusive-related gold system. So maybe just some comments here about the Casa Berardi deformation zone. You can see that these deformation zones along which these larger gold deposits are placed, they're generally east-west in the Abitibi Greenstone Belt. But here we have a change in orientation where we go to a more northwest southeasterly orientation. And these jogs, as we call them, changes in orientation in the structures, they often give rise to dilatant zones, which allow the intrusive hydrothermal systems that carry the gold mineralization to be in place. And we believe that's what's happened here with the Douay deposit. So notice also that the Casa Berardi deformation zone has all of the main types of gold systems that we find in the Abitibi Greenstone Belt. Casa Berardi is a gold quartz vein. Estratus is a gold-rich VMS. Douay is an intrusive-related gold system, and Vesa is kind of a variant of the Casa Berardi system, but doesn't have the quartz veins. And this is a little bit of an oddball in that it seems to be a variant, if you wish, of the VMS type systems that happens to be very, very gold rich.
All right, so just a recap of the resources again. The indicated ounces are primarily at Douay West, which is one of the higher grade zones on the property. We also have some indicated ounces in the Porphyry zone, both in the western and eastern portions. So 422,000 ounces at 1.52 grams per ton. Then 2 million ounces inferred in pit at roughly a gram per ton. And then this last resource estimate, we contemplated for the first time ever a deposit-wide initial underground estimate. And this was done at a 1 gram per ton cutoff for 1.75 grams per ton and just over 300,000 ounces. Important to note here that this is just a first pass underground estimation for the property. The blocks beyond the reporting shapes, RPA did list as roughly 500,000 to 1.5 million ounces potential for additional resources in that same interval. This resource was also done at $1,500 gold and a 0.45 cutoff for the in-pit ounces. Lastly, just to note, a lot of the assets in Quebec or resources that have been around for a while typically have staged or tiered royalties on them. We're very fortunate in that there is only 130,000 ounces currently subject to a 1% NSR.
Jonas, just a quick question there regarding the inferred ounces. A few people have been wondering, what's it going to take, or what is the strategy to move those inferred into indicated?
Yeah, we have a few slides upcoming that Fred will touch on that. The Western Porphyry zone is a great example where we have a limited number of indicated ounces to date, and that's just due to spacing. A lot of the drill holes were more than 50 meters apart, which is what RPA required to classify as indicated. So we'll have a couple slides that will show the potential to have a cascading effect as we do drill select infill holes in areas like the Western Porphyry. So I think we'll touch on that a little later.
Perfect.
So this table shows the numbers that Jonas just talked about at the 0.45 grams per ton cutoff. So essentially the idea is to show here what happens when you increase the cutoff. So realistically, under reasonable or current gold prices, of course, if gold goes to over $2,000, then the scenario will be a bit different. But under normal assumptions, a reasonable cutoff for this type of deposit would be somewhere between 0.45 and 0.65 grams per ton gold. So you can see here that within that range of cutoffs, we end up obviously at a higher cutoff. You have a higher average gold grade, but even at a cutoff of 0.65, where we're getting an average indicated grade of 1.83 and average inferred grade of 1.25, we're still looking at almost 2 million ounces. So really, depending on what the economic conditions are at the time of exploitation, cutoffs can be varied to get the desired economic results.
Okay, before I pass over to Fred for the bulk of the presentation, I just wanted to highlight our high-level integrated exploration approach. The Douay system itself is huge. It covers a 6 by 2 kilometer area where the known deposit is today. And so our exploration focus within that area and beyond is twofold. First, we're looking at defining an optimized subset within the total contained, which we believe we can do with select infill and step-out drilling, which Fred will touch on, primarily the Douay West, western part of the Porphyry, and then there are other areas like the Northwest zone that we believe could also be a part of this starter pit story for us going forward. The second part of our strategy, given we have a 355 square kilometer property, 55 kilometers of strike along the Casa Berardi deformation zone, and nearby deposits like Vesa that are significantly higher grade, we're doing geophysics in the field as we speak and have drill-ready Vesa lookalike targets already, which will be part of our fall drilling.
Okay, here's just a view looking down onto blocks as defined by the RPA 2019 resource estimation update. Keep in mind here that we're not showing the entire conceptual pit. We're only showing the portion of the blocks that grades more than 1 gram per ton gold, in line with our strategy, as Jonas pointed out, of targeting near surface higher grade material, because that the grade of the material that's mined in the first 5 years has a very important impact on economics and notably the payback. So you can see that there's some significant concentrations of high-grade material in the western part of the Porphyry zone, as Jonas mentioned previously, the Douay West zone. And in the northwest zone, where we have significantly less drill density, there are some indications of additional near-surface higher-grade material that we're currently drilling. One of the holes we drilled up there was in 2020 and gave us some quite positive results. The next slide shows the distribution of the conceptual pits as defined by RPA 2019. So that's the red outlines. The pink hatched areas are areas on the margins of or between these near surface higher grade areas that have insufficient drilling and require additional testing. And the pink dots are basically to get closer to I'm going to say definition drilling and to upgrade the significant portion of the inferred to indicated. Essentially what we need to do to have more than 85% indicated is to have those areas in red, which are the starter pit areas, drilled off on 50-meter centers. Okay, next slide shows the Douay West area, so the extreme western end of the deposit. Again, you can see the black outline, that's the starter pit search space. And again, we're just showing blocks from the RPA 2019 model that grade more than a gram. So you can see that there's a fair amount of high-grade material at Douay West and that it's fairly continuous. The image on the left shows a view looking obliquely down to the north, and I'm illustrating one of the intercepts there, more or less in the central part of this search space where we got 3.51 grams per ton gold over 59 meters. So that's one of the more significant accumulations of gold on the property. The image on the right-hand side shows the same thing, but looking more of a side-on view, sectional view. So you can see the vertical extent, the vertical continuity of mineralization here, which is still open at depth because, as you can see, the density of drilling below about 500 meters is pretty low. Moving on to the Porphyry, the western part of the Porphyry zone. What we're showing here are the gold intercepts from all the previous drilling in the green bars. We're showing the sets that we drilled in 2020, and most importantly, we're showing a number of intervals in these white ellipses that require additional drilling. So at this point in time, we have two starter pit search spaces that are disconnected, but as you probably noted in the previous slide, the pink hatched area, which is basically the areas for further testing, we have the objective there of attempting to join up these two individual zones to form a single one. So you can see that that's quite possible, given the limited density of drilling in between these zones. The yellow line is a line of section, which will illustrate some of the results we got from our 2020 drilling. So those are the holes that are labeled. So you can see, looking to the west, you can see here we have a series of mineralized zones that are more or less subparallel, hosted within this intrusive rock, which is called syenite, and then the wall rock is basalt. One of the interesting things to note here is we have a relatively small block of indicated resources, and the reason for that, keeping in mind that this hole 281 was drilled in 2020, was not present at the time the resource estimation was done. This is also a 2020 hole, and this is also a 2020 hole. So basically, by not having this hole in there, the separation between the holes down the dip of the mineralized zone was greater than 50 meters. Therefore, it was not possible to extend this indicated block further down. But as we continue drilling and doing infill drilling, you can see that logic would have it that the mineralization appears to be fairly continuous from surface right the way down to the base of the pit. This is the outline of the pit here. You can also see that in hole DO 2283, we got a pretty significant intercept. So that's 1.9 grams per ton gold over 17 meters, just below the base of the pit. We also got another intercept further down of 1 gram over 7 meters in the last 7 meters of the hole. And the last 2 meters of this intercept were about 1.4 grams per ton. So that means that this hole has to be deepened and that there's good potential for additional mineralization over this interval. You note that the other holes that we're showing here, they either terminated or went off section in this interval. So this entire volume here on the north side of this pit continues to have potential. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why we were drilling these holes in 2020, is to better test the northern limit of this this mineralized zone, which is one of the better ones that we have in the property. So that's quite encouraging. What does it
Okay,
look?
so Fred, sorry, one sec there, because I think that's a key point, is that while drilling maybe some follow-up holes here, is that they will count as some infill holes when you're shallower in the hole, but then extending it deeper, that has the potential to add more ounces. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and not only the potential to add more ounces, but also to increase the total tons of this portion of the pit in this particular area. So we're interested in the first 5 years of exploitation. So we're talking about the top 250 meters, which is basically a little bit above the base of this pit. But you know, the material that we find here is still within the starter pit depth range, if you wish. So that's pretty significant. So all of this area here is high potential.
How easily can that starter pit plan be moved if you do find some higher grade or just even more ounces down below there?
Well, at this point in time, the starter pit that we're talking about is really conceptual, so it's really more of a search space. It's not defined per se. So by the time you get to you know, pre-feasibility and so on, that starter pit area is going to be much better defined because you will have drilled off that particular area at 50-meter centers. Now we still have a fair amount of drilling to do. When I say a fair amount, I didn't mention that in the previous slide with the pink dots, but basically for us to get to 50-meter centers, if we're selective, we can do it in 10,000 meters, again, within a starter pit search space. And if we want to be completely rigorous and drill everything off on 50-meter centers, it may be more like 20,000 meters, both of which are easily doable in a single winter. So it's not like we're talking years and years of drilling. It can be done fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other thing to note here before I move on to the next slide is this intercept here, which was 1.2 grams per ton over 163.5 meters. It's probably one of the longer intercepts that we have had on the property. So this is obviously a key area at the Douay deposit. What does it look like in terms of the block model? Again, we have the outline here of the western part of Porphyry, and again, the two zones. And I've linked them together here in the sense that this is part of the search space. Like you can see that there's not a lot of drilling in this area, so additional drilling is needed. I'm showing one of the holes here that I highlighted before, 1.23 grams per ton gold over 75 meters. So that's in this particular area. So this again is an oblique view. North is in this direction, but we're looking at a 2D representation of a 3D object. This is another view which is more side on. So basically this black outline here is a search space that I mentioned before, is this same search space that we see here. You can see again that there's a fair amount of continuity in the higher grade mineralization. Orange is greater than 1 gram and purple is greater than 3 grams. So there's some pretty good pops in this western porphyry area. Okay, moving on to the northwest zone, and you'll recall that is a relatively new starter pit area search space. So we had a historical hole here that we wanted to test the western continuity of, because you can see that there's probably something like 500 meters undrilled in this area. So we drilled this hole in 2020 and got 3.4 meters at 4.16. Very, very good grades, followed by 20 meters at 1.15. And the interesting thing is that this was obtained right at the base of overburden. So really our near surface, and this is the current interpretation of where the mineralized zone may go, like taking into account the results from historical holes. And you can see that there is a major contact zone between basalts to the south and sediments to the north. And this is not just a rock type change, it's also a major structural boundary. And you can see that the mineralization here is just to the north of this, what we call a lithotectonic boundary. So basically what that does, the success that we had here, opens up the possibility of additional mineralization within all of these white ellipses that have no drilling. Note the size of this white ellipse down in here, and here we have the central zone, and I'll show in the slide a little bit later on that this boundary and its mineralization that extends some distance to the north extends all along the northern flank of the system. So anyway, the next image is going to be a section along this mineralized zone, so you can see more or less what it looks like and how close to surface this mineralization is.
Hey Fred, real quick, how would you rank those undrilled targets here, these ellipses?
In terms of priority, I think areas like this, for instance, we would definitely want to do some geophysics. In areas where you already have some intercepts, you would just do a step out. So I think basically what's of particular interest to me is that If you sum up all these undrilled intervals, you're talking about 3.4 kilometers of strike, not including the intervals that are mineralized, all along the northern flank of the Douay deposit. So that's a lot of space for adding additional ounces. So for me, that's quite exciting. And so I look forward to doing more step-out drilling and some more geophysical work in some of these larger ellipses. And I can show you a little later that some of the geophysical work we have already been doing on these targets have given us some very, very encouraging results. So this is what it looks like on section. This is the historical intercept that we were following up. So that had given 3.2 grams per ton gold over 8.9 meters, essentially at the base of overburden. This is overburden here. We got a significantly thicker intercept, and there's still a 200-meter gap to the next drill hole. There's also a 150-meter gap between this historical hole and the next hole here. And so basically, by just adding a number of short holes, maybe 150 meters deep, on this section to the north and to the south, we'd be able to define reasonably well what the size potential actually is for this near surface higher grade mineralization. What does it look like in the 3D model? So again, this is an oblique view. This is the hole that we're talking about, DO2272. You can see there's a fair amount of high grade material here. There's a gap with no blocks having been defined, and that's because this intercept was obtained subsequent to the resource estimation that was done here. So basically, this is the search space, the area within which we believe we can find significantly more near surface high grade material. Again, the same intercepts that we talked about before. And this is the kind of the same view with the same search space, but looking at things more on section. So that's the existing blocks and high grade that we were chasing, and this is the intercept that does not yet have blocks, and that's all of the open space, say, to continue expanding this this zone here. So that's all quite encouraging, and we expect to do some additional drilling here in the winter. And why wait until the winter? Well, that has to do with the nature of the terrain. Like in this area, it's relatively swampy. So from a technical standpoint and a cost standpoint, it's better to wait until the ground is frozen. Okay, so this is just a slide to move on to more exploration scale target, but it does show you what some of the mineralization looks like in the Porphyry zone, notably in the western part of the Porphyry. So you're looking at this reddish cyanide rock with fracture-filled pyrite with gold, and all this purple stuff is actually fluorite. So it's very, very pretty rock. Something that I'd be happy to have in my kitchen as countertop. Anyway, okay, so looking at conceptual targets and the property in general, I mentioned previously this lithotectonic boundary between basalts to the south and sets to the north, and mentioned a few of these ellipses. Basically, you can see that there's some significant areas that do not have drilling, which is what all these ellipses are. And the interesting thing is this target here actually has already been tested by geophysics, because we did in this winter we did a test survey over top of the 531 zone that extended right into this area. So I'll show you the results of that in a moment. Basically, excuse me, emphasizing again this major lithotectonic boundary that goes through main zone, through central zone, and extends all the way up into northwest zone here. So all along this contact is a favorable area for testing, and a few other targets of interest like this 531 zone geophysics that we did show that this zone is open to the southeast, also open to the northwest. And we have a series of other targets. I can see here there's some high grade mineralization here that is not necessarily fully closed off. There's not a lot of drilling here. Same thing happens in the Douay West zone, so there's additional drilling to be done there. So this is the 531 zone. So basically we're looking at this area here. And we previously interpreted the higher grade intervals both from 2019 drilling, where we got these incredible intercepts, and interpreted the zone as being east-southeast. You can see there's a drilling gap there of 370 meters. There's a single hole with an intercept shown in as these green bars here, and that's greater than 0.45 grams per ton gold. And there's another drilling gap of 700 meters. So the question was, well, can we demonstrate the continuity of this sulfide system that we were, that we understood reasonably well because we'd done a fair amount of drilling? Can we demonstrate that continuity with geophysics? So we did that. This is what we got. So here the green bars show the distribution of gold. the gold associated with disseminated sulfides. The blues and the purple, they represent chargeability anomalies. So chargeability in this case reflects the abundance of disseminated sulfide. So you can see that that anomaly, the physical anomaly coincides reasonably well with gold mineralization. And that, as we previously hypothesized, that it is open in the direction that we expected. So what we're doing at this point in time, we've cut the grid in this area to continue expanding this anomaly to the east-southeast, also to expand the anomaly to the northwest. And note here, this is the other anomaly I was mentioning before, the circle that we saw previously. So this is the main zone with its gold mineralization, again shown as the green bars, and the gold mineralization extends up in through here. Then we have the edge of the beginning of a chargeability anomaly here. And note there's an 800-meter interval here with no drilling. There's a little pop of gold here, a 600-meter gap with no drilling. So the location, the position of this new target is really quite interesting, and we hope to be able to drill that this fall because there's some good access in this area and relatively high ground that's not swampy.
Hey, Fred, maybe do you mind touching quickly on the difference in kind of IP technology from, say, even a decade or more ago to current IP in terms of the depth potential?
Yeah, so in the past, IP surveys generally did not see much deeper than about 200 meters, and that's if the ground cover was not too thick and not particularly conductive. So in the meantime, we've gone to significantly more powerful transmitters. We have improved software, of course, and generally better equipment, so that we're actually able to see down to depths of 450 to 500 meters in 3D IP mode. So that's a significant advantage in terms of, comparing to what we were able to see before. And IP is really important to us because essentially we know that the gold mineralization at Douay is always associated with sulfide, and it's always associated with disseminated sulfide, which gave you an IP response. So essentially the ability to be able to see down to 500 meters depth, essentially saying that we're able to see with geophysics down to the base of an eventual pit. So I think, for instance, for testing the northern flank of the Douay system, using IP to see where we have sulfides and where we don't is an important way of discriminating where you might want to drill and where not.
Hey, so Fred, some people are wondering too why there's such a discrepancy in some of these drill holes. There's some big gaps that need to be filled in. Does this just have to do with an old management team and now kind of the relook that this new team that has been involved in Maple Gold for a couple of years now is trying to tie everything together there, make it a bit more systematic?
Yeah, I think really to drill the whole system off at 50-meter centers would take a lot of drilling. So essentially what people do in the exploration stage is they do step outs and infill in areas where they have previously hit intercepts. So you gradually build up the system, the limits of the system to the west, to the east at depth as you go. So for instance, these 800-meter drilling gaps, they would have said, well, this hole wasn't that good. This hole had some mineralization in it, but it wasn't as good as some of this stuff here. So obviously this became lower priority. But then if you find out when you do geophysics, deeper geophysics, that there's actually a target sitting right here, it's pretty easy to fit a 531 sized zone of several 100,000 ounces or more within this new target area, taking into account all the space that you have. So you'll see that in several areas, obviously in areas where they had significant hits historically, there is usually follow-up around it. So one of the things that we need to do is piggyback on, improved geophysical and other technologies to be able to define completely new targets, but within the overall Douay deposit search space. And an example of that would also be using artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence has been around for a while. It's something that's popular nowadays, but has obviously evolved. But this is prospectivity map that was generated back in 2008 for part of the resource area. You can see that it stops at Porphyry zone, does not include 531 main zone. And we can see what we see here is the prospectivity results in these colors, on which I've superimposed the position of these RPA pits and the current distribution of drill holes. So you can see that some of these targets, like the western continuity of Northwest zone, eastern continuity of the Nika zone. This Nika zone, by the way, was added in 2018, so there was a discovery by our team. So these extensions we're aware of, and we started to drill test them, and they're quite interesting in terms of geology, but we haven't really hit yet a longer, broader gold intercept. This is a smaller target. This target here we thought was of particular interest for two reasons. One is because these two holes, we relogged them before COVID, and essentially the geology here is very similar to the geology on the southern side of this porphyry zone. And this anomaly is also on the eastern side, and I'll show you that in another slide in a moment, of geophysical anomaly, a magnetic anomaly that we call the 531 Southwest zone. So we've cut a grid over top of this artificial intelligence anomaly, and if we get chargeability anomaly in that area, we plan to do some initial drilling there this fall again because it's relatively high and dry in this area. So current work, summer IP, well, we've done the line cutting. The geophysics is to start early in August. Again, this is the 531 zone. The black dots are all the historical holes. These are the 3 test lines that we did before. This is the main zone west target that I just mentioned a moment ago. This is the more or less the position of this lithotectonic boundary that I mentioned earlier. And the white lines are the grid lines that we just cut recently in the last couple of weeks. So the south target, as you can see, includes the artificial intelligence target that I showed you a moment ago. You can see underneath here, this yellow color means it's a mag low. So there's a mag low surrounded by mag highs, which is a similar kind of pattern that we get within the porphyry zone. So this target here is quite large. It's like 3.5 kilometers, just portion of it. And then that includes as well the east-southeast continuity of the 531 zone. So this is a very large area to play with, and you can see there's very little drilling. Like the drilling that has been done is 531 zone. Outside the 531 zone, there's a couple holes here and there, and that's pretty well lit. And these are the 2 that I mentioned before that have contact style of gold mineralization, very similar to what we have in porphyry zone. So this area is pretty exciting. And again, note no drilling whatsoever here. So we're talking about 700 meters more or less. No drilling in here, and again, no drilling up in there. So there's more testing to be done. Just to show you what it looks like, we're the line cutting that we were doing, and this is probably the South Porphyry grid, which is relatively not very densely vegetated. Just want to give you a feel as well for the property scale target distribution. We've been talking about the resource area here. So this hatched is RPA 2019 conceptual pits. We have some targets further afield, like note the scale 3 kilometers. So this is about 5 kilometers to the northeast of the resource area. It's an IP target that we defined with geophysics in 2019 and 2020, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But that's a gold target. It's a VESA lookalike type of target. And you'll remember that VESA was about 500,000 ounces at 6 grams. So, you know, even finding one of those small lenses, VESA was only 450 meters long, would have a significant impact on the economics of Douay. These black zones, they're also targets, but they're copper zinc targets that have been defined, were defined in 2018 during a mapping program, mapping and sampling. And these gold targets here are defined from top of bedrock drilling that we also did in 2018. So this is the interpreted continuation of the Estradas horizon. Estradas deposit is a gold-rich VMS that we showed early on in the presentation. There's another similar horizon here, which is called Newiska, and that carries on down through what's known as the Harricana Deformation Zone, and then the Joutel Deformation Zone, which we call Castle Brody South. And Eagle Tel Bell deposit sits somewhere in here, and that again is about 6 grams per ton. So VESA and Eagle Tel Bell are very interesting deposit styles with significantly higher grade that we're obviously very interested in chasing. Yeah, this is just to show again at the more regional scale what the outline of the AI study is that we're currently that's currently ongoing. So the previous study just basically covered a portion of the resource area. Well, obviously, we want to cover all of the resource area, plus as far as we have high density of data. And if you ask me why don't we cover the entire property, that's because there's a significant drop in data density across this boundary. This is the outline of a 2016 airborne survey within which most of our drilling has been done so far. So really, artificial intelligence is most useful where you have the highest data density. And the idea is to allow the computer to come up with patterns and targets that may not necessarily be immediately visible to the human eye, just because eventually we get to a situation where we have data overload. So again, just quickly the distribution of the IP that we've done so far. So these blue lines were done in 2019. The red lines were infill done in 2020, and these lines have been cut and will be they're meant to expand the targets that we got in here with a survey to be done in August. Again, the red block here is what we did in 2020 in the winter. These are the areas that we will expand, so we can expand the anomaly that I showed you before. And this is the South Porphyry artificial intelligence and magnetic target in that area. And of course, again, you can see these drilling gaps all along the northern flank there. So zooming in a little bit on the eastern part of the property. So this is the Vesa deposit, 0.4 million ounces. This is the package within which Vesa and similar gold prospects are found. The same package of rocks goes through on our property. So 2019 geophysics showed that there's a series of anomalies on the south side and a series of anomalies on the north side. They're both interesting in the sense that they're roughly 3 kilometers long, but the northern one grabbed our attention to a greater extent because it has very little historical drilling. In fact, the anomalies themselves have a single drill hole in the southwest margin of it. This is the 531 zone, and that's the main zone. So we're talking the extreme eastern extremity of the deposit area, which probably, the favorable horizon there could eventually continue into these chargeability anomalies there that we can do further testing on. So zooming in on this southwestern portion of the northeast IP target. So we have this area here that's basically drill ready, and that got detailed in 2020. And so this is the full extent of the northeast target. And the interesting thing is we have a historical hole just here that tested the edge of this chargeability anomaly. And that hole gave 40 meters of overburden followed by 110 meters of bedrock that consisted of silicified sediments with disseminated pyrite and anomalous gold throughout the entire hole. So basically that's very similar to what Vesa looks like. And essentially what that means is that when we drill test this, we're not just drill testing a geophysical anomaly, we're drill testing a geophysical anomaly that has geological and geochemical support from this historical hole. Okay, looking in more detail, these are the results of the 2020 winter 2020 survey. So that's the historical hole, very short. That's the proposed hole. This is the trend of the chargeability anomaly. That's a line of section that I'll show you in the next slide, keeping in mind that this is a level plan at 150 meters depth. So you can see that the historical hole here in black actually is projected, so you can see the scale of that versus what we're proposing. You can see that the historical hole in black really just tested the edge, the upper part of this anomaly. We obviously are going to be going down into the core of it. But keeping in mind that Vesa extended to something like 750 meters depth, having this anomaly open at 500 meters depth is encouraging. So this vertical section here is 500 meters. This is a bit loaded, but it basically shows you the current concept. So this hatchet outline is the outline of where we're going to be doing we're currently doing our artificial intelligence study. Yellow are the interpreted structures, major regional structures. This green dash is basically the portion of the structures that we believe have the highest potential for gold mineralization. That's our southern IP series of anomalies, northern IP series of anomalies. In orange here, those are the RPA pits. In blue, those are the starter pit search spaces that we talked about before. And the pink dots, they're the distribution of the holes that we have as part of our plan for fall drilling. And you'll ask me, well, why are they all concentrated here? They're all concentrated in this area plus that area, because basically this area is higher ground, drier ground, and we can actually drill there in the summer. So there's a series of exploration targets. This is the South Porphyry artificial intelligence target. This is the 531 zone extension. This is the new main zone target. We have an existing main zone target that's on the extension of the existing deposit. So lots of targets, and this structure here would be the Joutel deformation zone that I talked about before. And you can see that there is basically no drilling along it. So it hasn't really been a priority in the past, but given the ability that we have to see deeper with the geophysics, I think that would be quite interesting to do some test lines over top of this. So, summary, Jonas, you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah, just to recap, and then we'll open it up for any more questions. Large established gold resource estimate was last year. Does not include the 2020 drilling already done this year or drilling we'll do this fall. Touched on the exploration, or sorry, the excellent infrastructure. Also to note, this project has about 250,000 meters of drill core in the library, all archived at site and in good condition, which is quite rare. We've talked about the near surface focus within the node deposit area, which will be a big part of our program heading into 2021 winter. Again, the significant exploration upside, whether it's the drilling gaps along the northern flank, the South Porphyry, some of these new regional targets such as the Northeast Veza lookalike target as well, which we're looking forward to testing this fall. And then again, in terms of moving this project forward and accelerating the pace of exploration, we've maintained active discussions with different strategic groups. Certainly the gold price and healthier balance sheets of those producers, I think makes them more likely to look at opportunities like this for collaborating to move this forward in the future. So I think with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, all right, guys. There are a lot of questions here. I have kind of segregated them, organized them into certain categories. If we don't get to all these questions, you know what, I'll follow up with Jonas and Fred in a dedicated interview. First and foremost, let's go into drilling then. Just a quick comment. When is drilling going to start again, and how many meters are planned? Do you guys have a general answer for this?
Yeah, I would say that fall drilling is expected to begin sometime between late September, early October, and we plan to drill between 2,000 and 3,000 meters, and that's those pink dots that I showed you in one of the last slides.
Okay, now let's go back to slide 31, because I think some people want a bit more of a discussion on the targets and the ranking of targets, because, hey, in all fairness, you did outline a number of different targets, some of which will be drilled fairly soon. It seems like these targets on the eastern side of the project will be drilled during this fall program. But Fred, any general discussion on ranking of all these different targets? Where would you like to get to first? Where do you think provides the best opportunity for some high-grade discoveries?
Yeah, I think basically we're looking for near surface high grade everywhere. And of course, the objectives of the fall drill program is a bit more biased towards exploration. Like we're talking about an exploration target here, the main zone extension. This is quite new in the sense that there's only drill holes there. This is actually a step out, right? And really, this program is a smaller program in advance of a larger program that will start only a month or so later. So we're talking January 2021. And the drilling from January until April 2021 is going to be very much focused within these startup pit search spaces. So the reason why we're not drilling in the startup pit search spaces, which is obviously an important focus for us in the fall, again, is because of ground conditions. So that's kind of the concept.
Okay, so it is still very much focused on exploration, maybe not so much on resource conversion right now, but really the theory here is if you can find some high grade near surface, then that does help out some sort of economic mine plan or some sort of economic study moving forward. What about drilling at depth? Any indications that there could be some higher grade at depth that could support an underground mining operation?
As Jonas mentioned, we did a first pass underground resource estimation and came up with about 300,000 ounces, averaging something like 1.75 grams per ton gold. And that's only a small portion of what's actually there, in the sense that, you know, it had to form part of RPA's reporting shapes, and the blocks had to be supported by at least 2 drill holes. And given that we have very little drilling below about 500 meters depth, it's difficult to get a feel for what the full underground potential may be. I think it's important to note that there's significant geological similarities between Douay and Malartic. And Malartic has mineralization that goes down at least to 1.8 kilometers vertically. Our deepest drill hole only went to 960 meters down the hole. So there's basically, we have no information below about 850 meters or so. So, but to answer your question, that clearly there is significant potential for this to carry on underground. This type of system elsewhere, they usually have what we call feeder zones. Like the type of rocks that we're dealing with require deep structures, like basically mantle tapping structures, so all the way down to several tens of kilometers. And these deep structures typically have control, if you wish, the root zones for the intrusive hydrothermal system. So yes, the focus is from an economic perspective, the open pit portion has to be viable, but for sure in terms of later expansion, the underground opportunity is certainly significant, and that's why we included that in our latest resource estimation update.
Okay, now in terms of resources and resource estimations, the bulk tonnage opportunity here at Douay, how big could this actually be? You already have in an inferred and indicated category 2.4, let's say, a little bit more, or a little under 2.4, sorry, a little bit over 2.7 million ounces. How big could this overall resource be?
Well, I think if we refer to the size of the system is one starting point. So basically, we've talked about 6 by 2 kilometers. That's the current extent of the current conceptual pits, but gold mineralization extends beyond that. If we look at known systems, deposits that are in operation, like Malartic again, the Malartic pit is about 3 kilometers long, and if you include the underground portion of the resource there, the whole system is about 6 kilometers long. Intriguingly as well, Detour, which is on the next deformation zone to the north, is also a 6 kilometer long system. And all of those deposits have in excess of 10 million ounces. Now, I'm not saying that Douay will necessarily have in excess of 10 million ounces, but it is that scale of a system. And the other thing that's worth noting is that depending on what the price of gold is, like we did our latest resource estimation at $1,500 gold. Well, really the question is going to be, what's the expected price of gold when this deposit enters production? So if you're looking at a significantly higher gold price, what you end up doing is going to significantly lower cutoff. So you end up mining more tons, more ounces at a lower average grade because you can do that economically speaking. So obviously, you know, if you think about $2,000 gold or $2,200 gold, which is not impossible, then the total contained ounces will rise significantly. So basically what we're saying is that, you know, it's slightly under 3 million ounces, but that's pit constrained and constrained by these underground reporting shapes. So you can imagine that unconstrained, and I can't give you a number, but you can imagine that unconstrained, the geological endowment, if you wish, is very significantly larger.
So we have referred to this RPA resource back in 2019. Comment that you guys kept making was that this was taking a more conservative approach. You've even mentioned it was done at $1,500 gold. Fine, gold is much higher right now. But what were some of the changes and how the model was adjusted in a conservative nature? Can you explain that quickly?
Yeah, so basically a deposit at this stage, so we're talking 85% inferred, does typically not have a lot of geotechnical information. So the consultants, when they do their resource estimation, they have the option of going conservative. So for instance, they can use pit slopes that are shallow, or they can be more aggressive and use pit slopes that are steeper. Now, steeper pit slopes, like we would have had in our earlier resource estimations, they allow you to have, I'm going to say, deeper pits and higher volume pits with more ounces. But the question always is, how realistic is it to propose steeper pit slopes like that? So basically, the RPA 2019 version had significantly shallower pit slopes. The other thing that you need to consider is, well, how far do you project any given intercept? So RPA, again, they're very conservative. And so the projection distances were significantly reduced compared to the previous resource estimation. A third factor, and there's a few of them, a third factor has to do with capping. So it's kind of standard practice to cap high grades within a deposit. So, you know, you may have an intercept that's 50 grams per ton, and after capping, what gets reported to the block model is only 15 if you're capping at 15. So there's a whole theory behind the applicability of capping. And again, RPA are very conservative in their capping methodology because not only do they cap, but they also limit the search distance for these higher grade assays. So all of that combined does end up having a significant impact on total reported contained ounces.
Okay, thanks, Fred. One other question regarding the bulk tonnage here at Douay. Metallurgy becomes crucial in these type of systems. What kind of summary can you give us in terms of the metallurgy that you've already tested and maybe future tests?
Fred, maybe flip to, I think you have the slide in the appendix for that if you like.
Yep. Am I still controlling the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, you're still in control there, Fred.
I can't go. Hold on. No, it's not happening.
Metallurgy, yeah.
You can just answer it then.
Yeah, anyway,
no problem,
so basically the objective with early metallurgical work is to get a feel for what the gold recovery is as a function of grade, as a function of geographic distribution, so domain, and as a function of grinding fineness, because the finer you have to grind, the more energy and the higher your operating costs. So we have done preliminary metallurgical work, and basically we've found that a lot of the gold is free, and so relatively easy to liberate, and we can see that we get quite high recoveries in initial test work by bulk leaching. And recoveries using the more conventional milling, flotation, and so on is also quite good. So we're talking high 80%, low 90% with the different options that are available to us. So really, I think preliminary work's been quite encouraging in that regard. Keyword here is mainly free gold.
Okay, just a couple more quick questions and we're going to wrap it up. Any idea on a time frame to some sort of a PEA potential?
I think our idea is to do some additional drilling in the starter pit search space and very much focus on those areas in terms of demonstrating the economic viability. So I think the logical thing for us to do would to do that drilling, do an internal scoping study to see what additional work may be necessary before we go to a PEA. So again, I can't really give a specific date because really it's going to depend on the results of the drilling and the results of the internal scoping. But certainly internal scoping is on the to-do list for 2021.
Now, is this stuff also dependent on updating the resource as well, depending on what the drills yield here?
I think that will be part of the scoping, but basically if you want to have a look at what the economics of the starter pit search space is, you'll want to do an update in those areas because that's where we will have concentrated our drilling.
Yeah, and just I guess a further comment to that would be we'll do the more exploration focused drilling this fall. I would expect a larger program in the winter, currently raising $4 million, which will help cover that work well into the next year. So again, on the back of those results, potential scoping, resource estimate, and then depending what the results are of that work, at the early end would be, toward later, Q4 2021. For a possible date, again, depending on if there's strategic support in the deal and exploration and development's accelerated, those things will all play a factor on that timeline.
Okay, since you brought up the fundraise, yeah, $4 million, any comment on when you expect that to close and also what that will bring the total share count to, please?
Sure. The financing would be expected to close in roughly a week's time, give or take a few days either way. In terms of the share count, had 239 out previously. So this would add another 23 million on top of that. No warrants again with this financing, which I believe is the third or fourth straight financing that we've completed without warrants. And will put us, $6.5 million in cash in the till after this financing.
All right. In full disclosure, I am also a shareholder of Maple Gold Mines. Jonas, just wrap us up. This is the end of the webinar. Wrap us up with general comments on what everybody should be focused on as you guys progress through the rest of this year with all the drilling and all these targets that you have in plan.
Yeah, I guess just to wrap up, again, this is a project that's been around. It's, our team's put in a lot of hard yards over the last couple of years, creating a new 3D model, defining a subset target area where we believe we can get to the first phase economics with some focused work. And then, just to highlight that this is a very big property on a favorable break, and some of the drilling this fall will higher risk certainly, in that it's more exploration focused. also has the chance to have a real significant impact, given we're hunting for higher grade material. So something to look forward in the fall. We'll have AI and IP results coming out here, and look forward to getting the drills turning again in the fall.
All right, Fred, Jonas, really appreciate your time. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, a replay will be available of this webinar shortly after it is completed. If we didn't get to your questions, I will bring Fred and Jonas back on to get those questions answered. If you have any questions that pop up after this webinar is over, please just continue to email them to me, fleck@kereport.com. In the meantime, I look forward to following along with the drill results and what comes out of the company once this financing is complete and once these drills get back on the ground. Fred, Jonas, thank you for your time today. Everybody visit my website, kereport.com. Also check out the Maple Gold Mines website for more information on the company. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.